A pointing of the finger from both sides as concerns continue over Zaporizhzhia power plant. This footage, released by the Russian Defense Ministry, shows shell craters and debris dotted around the complex after it came under fire over the weekend. For days, Moscow and Kyiv have been blaming each other for attacking the site, though who has done what remains unclear. The head of Ukraine's state nuclear power plant has accused Russian forces of turning the plant into a military base, and said Moscow's plan was to eventually disconnect the site from Ukraine's power grid.
The majority of power lines which connected the plant to the Ukrainian power system were damaged, so now the station is transmitting electricity through just one power line. It's very dangerous because if this power line is damaged, the station will go into blackout mode.
Ukraine has called on the international community to respond with sanctions on Russia's nuclear sector. The Kremlin, meanwhile, has accused Kyiv of trying to take Europe hostage.
The Zelensky regime committed another act of nuclear terrorism at Zaporizhzhia power plant on Sunday and created a humanitarian disaster in the Kherson and Zaporizhzhia regions.
Russian forces captured Zaporizhzhia in early March, but Ukrainian technicians are still operating it. Fighting there has prompted the United Nations nuclear watchdog to warn of a very real risk of disaster. The United States has urged Moscow to stop all military operations around facilities in Ukraine and to hand control back to Kyiv, while calls are growing for Russia to allow international inspectors to visit the site, which is safe for now.
And earlier I spoke to Mariana Bujerin, a nuclear expert at the Harvard Kennedy School. I began asking about concerns that this could develop into a nuclear disaster.
First of all, what we're seeing here is really unprecedented. That's the first thing we really need to take a note of, that none of the safety and security systems that we as an international community, as community of experts and practitioners, have designed for the safety and security of nuclear plants, none of them have been designed with the full military conflict in mind. And therefore, there really isn't a very reliable way to predict how some of these systems will behave when they're under massive shelling or they're hit by a cruise missile or sustainably bombed and so forth. Needless to say, having Europe's largest nuclear power plant in the middle of an armed conflict with bombs and missiles flying is an extremely, extremely dangerous situation.
How safe do you think the plant is at the moment? I mean, in this situation, we're talking about an active nuclear power plant here in the middle of a war zone.
So the key things to look out for is the safe and secure functioning of the cooling systems that are part of the safe operation of the reactor, but also the spent fuel pools. This is very hot, very radioactive material. It relies on the constant supply of cool water to keep it a certain temperature and to keep it safe. Now, shelling and bombing can damage either the supply of the actual water or the electricity that powers the pumps. And in that case, you do have redundancy systems. You have backup systems such as diesel generators. We heard that after this most recent shelling, one of the diesel generators was engaged as a backup system, but those are only temporary. So if the cooling system is not repaired in time, if there's electricity that's not supplied to the system, we could have a case where the water boils out, basically, and the temperature in the core or in the spent fuel pools rises critically, goes to really, really high temperatures, and we can see the meltdown of this nuclear material. Now, that might not necessarily result in an explosion like the one we saw at Chernobyl, but it would certainly contaminate the adjacent areas. It would result in enormous disruption. So now that we'd be looking at cleanup and getting cleanup crews into this military zone. So needless to say, this is extremely dangerous and extremely undesirable scenario.